The old cottage. That's your home now.
It's just me and you, Baxter. It's just me and you.
Something's haunting you, Mr. Black. I can see it.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central, and I am here today with Russell Owens, the director of Shepherd. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So for those watching who might be unfamiliar with your film, can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Shepherd is a psychological thriller based on some traditional Welsh ghost stories that I grew up with in my home country. It's something I wrote a good 15, nearly 16 years ago. And it's about one man's desperate attempt to escape grief and depression by taking a job as a shepherd alone on an island, thinking it would be the idyllic escape. As sometimes those jobs do come up, particularly in the UK. You know, oh, go off to a Scottish island or something and take. And I've always thought that that would be, a really bad idea, particularly if you're not in the right headspace. So this film is essentially about somebody who makes that decision and that jump, and for him to sort of spiral into madness and it all go wrong.
I was watching this and I was laughing because I was thinking to myself, this is such a depressed person thing, as a depressed person thing to do, to just like go off into the middle of nowhere and isolate yourself and never talk to anyone. But then once you're there, you realize it was the worst idea possible. I was like, this is a weirdly very identifiable story for someone who has dealt with depression.
Yeah, you do want to sort of run off and escape, thinking, "Oh, I'd love to be on an island," and then you get there, like, "Oh, okay, wait a minute, whoops," and exactly that.
So you talked about how this is based off of some Welsh folk tales that you grew up with. Can you talk a little bit more about those? Because there's some really striking imagery going on in this film, and I'd love to hear more about the inspiration for those images.
There's some terrifying. I mean, there's what? What's it called? There is a traditional, I remember it as a kid, but an absolutely terrifying Christmas tradition in Wales where you get a knock on the door and it would be a 9-foot skull of a horse with
I know exactly what you're talking about because my fiance and I talk about it all the time because it's both horrifying and the most heavy metal Christmas tradition I've ever
seen. And it is, but it's an ancient Welsh Christmas tradition, and you have to let it in for a drink. And I mean, obviously, we were terrified. I mean, this worse than Halloween or trick or treat. As a kid, you absolutely don't want that coming to your door. So there's elements of those traditions in Wales and things like that seeping in, but largely it's based on the same story Robert Eggers used for The Lighthouse, because that's a Welsh, small lighthouse in off the coast of Wales was where that actually happened, where two men went mad, one died, and it changed lighthouse laws in the UK. After that, it was the late 1700s, I think. And it was amazing that Robert Eggers was making that film, but I was filming at the same time as he was filming The Lighthouse, and Kate Dickie was in the film, who was in The Witch before that. And she went, "Oh, Robert's making a film about this." And I went, "No." But luckily he was doing a literal, which is brilliant for me, because knowing that story, I was like the first in line to see that somebody had actually done that story. But it took those elements. Instead of two people, it was one man and a dog, and it was a shepherd, and I kept the lighthouse as a sort of a mysterious metaphor, and so my story took that route, and the island, of course, and isolation making you go mad. But I took a much more quiet, atmospheric, psychological route.
And so the setting for this film is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, this is such a beautiful film to watch. And so how did you find the locations for where you were filming? Because it is incredible. Like, I want to go there right now.
It's stunningly beautiful. I mean, I weirdly, although the film is what it is, it's to be on the Isle of Mull is it's such a, I'm not religious, but there's sort of a very, very spiritual feeling about it. I mean, it's incredible. I just felt so clean and fresh all the time. And it's the middle of winter on Scottish Island. I mean, the idea of it is mad, but to be there is amazing, and it has a certain energy, that place. Whereas on film, although it looks beautiful, I spent about 4 weeks driving up from South Wales all the way up the West Coast, places I knew that would be great, exploring places to film, and nowhere there was some great places, but not everywhere was right. And the Isle of Mull was my last port of call. And I thought, if we don't get this, I don't know where we're gonna. We just have to drop it somewhere on the map and try and find. And I remember turning around a corner and seeing that opening shot with the three mountains and I thought, where the hell's that? It looked like it was another island, but actually it was another peninsula on the same island. And it took like an hour and a half to drive all the way around to this thing because the roads are so tiny, and this tiny little hobbit bridge you can't get lorries over or anything. So it's the worst place in the world to make a film, because we're building sets and doing all sorts. You can't get trucks there. You can't, have to take things over in bits. But there was nowhere else, because it had such a character. And when you've got one guy by himself with a dog, and then the dog goes missing, you have to surround that person with another character. And that character was the island in the film, very much so, because it's an illustration also of his psyche. And so it was so important to find the right place. And I remember doing it, and a location manager being very angry with me and saying, why did you choose the Isle of Mull? You should be, there's a place called Loch Tom outside Glasgow, and it's like 20-minute drive on a main road outside Glasgow. You park up and then you just film there, and it's water, there's mountains. It's like, it's not this. This is something else. And all I could say is, like, you'll have to see the end result to understand what I'm trying to do. That place was part of the casting.
Well, it feels like it's magical, like you were saying. There's something about it that feels weird and magical. Yeah. Like it's a living, breathing place. Because I know people say this all the time about their settings as characters, but it really was. Like everything about it was really, gorgeous. And so with the house that he's staying in, did you have to build that was that a set that you guys had to build? So you had to build that piecemeal and then bring it over to basically construct.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd had that cottage, and I genuinely thought when we got there, we were like, well, it's fine. It's an island. There's loads of like abandoned cottages and things. You see them on TV, and no, everybody's bought them. They've done them up on these white shows, and they've turned them into Airbnbs, and everything's luxury. Even the lighthouse on the island, which obviously the lighthouse in the film is a model and the base is a set. Because I went to the Isle of Mull to see their light. There's a beautiful little lighthouse there that I thought would be great to use. And that was an Airbnb, and it was beautifully done. And upstairs was like a dining table in the lamp room. I'm like, I can't use it unless I could trash it. So we put all our money into building sets that would reflect. Otherwise, it would be too rich. It's an illustration of his psyche in his mind. He's got to rock out, and he has to. And those settings, the cottage, the lighthouse, the landscape, everything is very important to inform the character. So we just about did it, but I think if we had just found some real places, it would be like another TV drama. You have to, to be cinema. I think those details are really important.
Oh, for sure. And especially like the impeccable details in the house with like the goat heads and all of the like certain parts of the furniture. It was really like
I grew up in my hometown has loads of Himalayan mountain goats. So it was in the news during the COVID lockdown. They all came into the town, just started eating everyone's it's the goat town of Wales. That was a nod to that goat's head. Couldn't believe they found it. It's brilliant. Chris Richmond again is our production designer. He was really and he's just sort of putting all these nods in. He listens to every word you say, and then suddenly it ends up in his sets. He's brilliant.
And I wanted to ask about the goat, so I'm glad because I was very much like, there's something about that goat that is very interesting, and I like it a lot, and I don't know why, but it's a cool detail like on the wall. Yeah. But pivoting from the production design, Tom Hughes as Eric, it's essentially just his movie for the most part, and he doesn't have a lot of dialogue either. So what was that like working with Tom to get into that headspace of not only being by himself, but in the headspace of Eric, who is really like going through a lot emotionally.
I think as a director, I could have chosen an easier film to do, because it's not just like, you know, you can have drama and several people to put up and you put actors together. For most of it, it was one guy, and which is why I needed to find the best landscape and the best sets we could, and make everything 360 degrees rather than you take a wall away and film. You know, it had to be him in case, so that he had enough around him to completely immerse himself into that, because the cameras, a lot of the time, it's there, it's right in his face, and he knew that, and he knew what he needed to achieve to make sure that he could tell that story, and make sure that people can really read his physical body language, rather than, you know, his dialogue, and everything was very cryptic. So and then the editor obviously had to follow his performance to plot out the story. So it was, we crafted it very carefully through storyboards and you know, and is the set, but 1-2 takes each time, and he nailed it, because I told him a handful of stories. He didn't like rehearsing or anything like that. He says, I need to let it brew and then I'll let it come out. And I was like, okay, what's this going to be like? And then when the camera rolled, you're like, okay, yeah, great, perfect. Yeah, that's Eric. So that's a real gift he's got, but it was a huge relief, because if we've gotten that character wrong, and we got the landscape wrong, and if we got you know, one of those elements wrong, nothing would have worked. So it's very delicate for film to put together, and to create an atmosphere, you know, because it only takes one little thing to trip you up, and particularly on a tight budget. So yeah, I mean, I'm, you know, really grateful that we got Tom.
Yeah. And I would be remiss not to mention Baxter, our dog, our companion. What was it like working with him? I love dogs. I love dogs.
Well,
So, and he seemed like a great guy. And like, you know, it makes sense. He's a shepherd dog. So it makes sense that that was the breed, I think, that you chose, right? So.
Yeah, Collie. He's
Collie.
Shuggy in real life was a girl, and incredible. I mean, it's so easy. I've worked with, everyone says don't work with kids, don't work with animals, don't work with pets.
I was going to bring that up. I hear that all the time.
Yeah. I've worked with kids. I always do a lot from commercials and a couple of short films, and I love working with animals. I've made loads of like dog and cat commercials for, like, you know, Specs and all sorts of things like that. So I really enjoy working with animals, and Sugar was just so easy to work with, and you just schedule enough time to make sure that you can play with the dog and make sure it gets a performance. But those border collies, they not border collie, it's like a Welsh sheepdog, are just very intelligent dogs. So it's a very intelligent breed. So and Joyce, the handler, had gotten down Shuggy's hand into a T, so I knew exactly when I said I needed to kind of be like this, or staring at the door and doing all that. She'd get a little bit of corned beef out of her pocket and she'd hide it somewhere. She'd hard to stay, and she'd shout at us, or her tail was. I was like, "Oh, you can't." And so, no, what? And then perfect performance next. So she was brilliant, really good.
The first shot with him in bed with her, I was like, they felt like a real dog and owner couple.
Yeah.
Cuddling in bed, obsessed. But I have one last question for you. If you had to schedule your perfect double feature with Shepherd, what film would you pair with it?
Well, everybody is, we've had a couple of runs in the UK now where everyone's pairing it with Lamb, and they're doing double feature cinemas. And I annoyingly haven't seen Lamb yet, and I know it's come out now, and I'm right, I've got it. I need to watch it. I haven't had 2 minutes, because everyone's pairing Shepherd with Lamb, and I haven't even had the opportunity to see Lamb, and it was at the London Film Festival. But I'd probably say something along those lines, or even The Witch. That's another kind of like a Kate Dickie double, if you like, but escapism into the wilderness and spiral into madness. Obviously that's set in a very different time, but this is I think it's a great exploration of psychology, as is The Lighthouse. But those are amazing films. Lighthouse is like some big budget things, so don't want to be too compared, but I'm very proud, very proud of Shepherd.
You should. I mean, and it's incredible what you created with the Shepherd. It's incredible to look at. It's so beautiful. So congratulations, because all of those elements came together to create something really gorgeous.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, and thank you so much for joining me, Russell, today to chat about Shepherd. Thank you so much. And everyone, Shepherd is out in theaters on May 6th and on VOD on May 10th.